had any comments, corrections on them? All right, well, not hearing any, we'll move forward. But if you do happen to review that and find something that you believe is incomplete or incorrect, just let Janet or I know, and we'll work on correcting that or making those additions. I see we had one more person join us who's also a long-serving member, but in a different role today. So Tammy, would you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tammy Denny, and I am the newly appointed or seated Executive Director for the Oregon Cattlemen's Association, previously with the Oregon Dairy Farmers Association. Hello, Wim.
Well, good afternoon, Tammy. Thanks for joining us, and welcome aboard with a different hat on today.
Thank you very much.
All right. So the third item on the agenda is talking about the NPDES general permit that our program, in cooperation with the DEQ, need to issue. So just a little background on NPDES general permits. These permits expire every 5 years. This will be our fourth general NPDES permit that we've worked on. And it's issued jointly between the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Environmental Quality. DEQ is the Clean Water Act delegated permitting agent for our state, and so we have a partnership with them through a memorandum of understanding, and both of the agencies work together to draft those documents and issue them. And once we get to a point of issuance, representatives from both of the agencies signed that permit. So it truly is a joint activity from start to finish. And we also operate the program jointly with DEQ. But after the permit documents are settled, ODA does the vast majority of the implementation work, registration and inspections of the permits. So we're to the point where our number 3 NPDES general CAFO permit is expiring in February of 2021, and we need to begin work on a new draft. The process for that is I take the old permit as a starting point and then work on what additions EPA may have made to the program in the 5 years previous. And for this particular permit, that's actually pretty simple because EPA has not made very many changes. There are some, but not many there. And then the agencies look then to the Oregon specific changes that we would like to include. And we work with our advisory committee as well as industry stakeholders and permittees to develop a draft and then an evaluation report that discusses the permit itself and the changes that we're proposing. Those documents go to a public notice once we're to that point and have a final public notice version. And then the public gets a chance to comment on the permit and the evaluation report. Then after that is completed, the agencies would look at the comments, respond to them, and make a decision on either issuing the permit as we noticed it, potentially amending the permit based on comments we received, which may require a potential second notice for some of the changes if we implement a substantial change. And the third option there would be to not issue the permit at all. So this general permit, it is one document, and there are multiple people that register to it. Currently, there's about 340, 350 facilities statewide that are registered to this general permit. So they will have the opportunity to renew. They'll have to complete a form saying that they're still in existence, still are operating, and still need the permit coverage. Then we will process the permit documents through that system I just discussed. And once we're able to get a final permit, then we would start registering those existing facilities, moving them from the version number 3 to this version number 4. right, version isn't really the right word. Each permit in and of itself is a new permit. So I had hoped today to have copies for you, well, before today, for you to start looking at for this discussion, and that didn't happen. And the reason for that is the agencies, ODA and DEQ, and I'm also going to add in water resources, are having discussions on another individual permit. And part of our conversations on that permit development have led us to think that we need to also look at this general permit, and some of those conversations are likely to affect this general permit. And so I apologize for not having a piece of paper in your hands for you to look at, but I do have a list of changes that we've implemented and intend to implement in the draft that you will get a chance to look at once we get that permit, put it together and the agencies have reviewed it and it's ready to go. So I was going to go through those changes, and happy to take verbal comments on them now, or you can provide comments later, or you could provide comments even later after you get to see them in a written version. But that's what I thought I'd do. So I'll pause for a minute here to see if anybody has any questions on process or anything else related to this activity.
Wim, how
Yes.
soon do you anticipate having something in a written form that we can review?
Tammy, I don't really have a good idea at this point. Sorry, I don't have a better answer there. But the items we're thinking about are pretty pretty in depth, and say could affect these general permits. All the individual permits we write, the foundation for them are the general permit. And so since we're having a conversation on a new individual permit we're writing, it stands to reason it would bleed backwards into a general permit. And since we're at this place of renewal, issuing this new permit, it's a good time to have that conversation and implement changes we may want to do. But as soon as I get a draft, my plan is to release it.
So it's pretty likely then we'll be extending the deadline past February and just doing a general extension on those 350 permits. Is that what you anticipate?
So that's a really great question, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that in process. So there's no way to extend the permit itself. Just the way the program and the system are set up, you can't do that. But what happens is when current permittees complete their renewal forms and send those back to us, what that does is it administratively extends their permit coverage, essentially for as long as it takes for the agencies to come up with a new permit. So as long as those folks that are currently registered complete that document we sent out, send it back, and sign it, then they are extended, and they will operate under the existing permit and their approved waste management plan until such time as we can get a new permit and start to register people to that new permit. The other thing is with the renewal forms, again, we don't have a piece of paper to show them a new permit, and they're saying, well, I think I want to sign under this new permit. And everybody was taught that you shouldn't sign anything without reading it first, and that's a good lesson, I think. The renewal, unfortunately, does have to happen before this permit expires. However, any permittee would definitely be able to review the permit and be part of the process of the permit development and implementation, and would be able to make that decision before they signed on to the new permit. So just because they sign the renewal form, that doesn't mean they're automatically going to be on this new permit. They still have to make that decision in the end. But that tells us that they are intending to. And again, the important part of that is that it extends their current permit coverage, and that's a very important thing they need to do. And for industry representatives, if folks have questions on the permit or the the renewal forms, just let me know. I'm happy to respond to those. All right, so my plan was to go through a few of the I'm going to turn my camera off here. Go through a few of the changes that we're proposing in the draft. And the permits divided up into sections. And we, in the permit structure and format, we intend to maintain the same. As I said before, there's not a lot of new things from EPA. The electronic reporting is probably the biggest thing from them. But starting in the definition section, there are several definitions that we're either going to add, proposing to add new ones, or change existing ones. The first one is, we've always referred to the nutrient management plan as an animal waste management plan. That's the nomenclature we've had in the old permits, and we are changing that now to a term called nutrient management plan, or NMP. And so there'll be a definition of what an NMP is. It was the same as an AWMP was, and that will change. That reference will change throughout the permit. We're adding additional information, or proposed to add additional information for the agronomic application rate description. The additional information basically says that the agronomic application rate is a mathematical formula that's included in the nutrient management plan. So there isn't one rate for every permittee. Each permittee develops their own rate inside of their nutrient management plan. And then all of the items in the nutrient management plan are incorporated into the permit by reference. So registrant A will have a calculational algorithm in their nutrient management plan that says how that permittee and their employees will calculate their rate, and what information they will use to do that work. And then in the record keeping, they have to keep those calculations for review by the department. We've added additional references to describe the word discharge, and the additional references are, discharge is defined both in the federal Clean Water Act language as well as in the state rules and statutes. And so we're just expanding that definition to include all of those meanings, both in federal law, Clean Water Act, and the state law and rule. This is a new thing for this permit that we've not had before, and that is we want to add the definition of a groundwater management area. Those are areas that are declared by DEQ, dependent on a set of rules that are developed for those areas. There are currently 3 of those in the state of Oregon, and there are permitted CAFOs that reside in all 3 of those areas. So because we wanted to later in the permit call out groundwater management areas as a unit that we might do something different in, we have to define what they are. We've added a state definition of the word pollutant. So the previous permits, the word pollutant had been defined as the definition included in Clean Water Act language in Code of Federal Regulations. So we're keeping that in there, but we're also adding the state definition, which is a bit more broad. And then we're updating the reference for the saturated soil definition, and that's fairly simplistic because the publication that we pulled that definition out of was updated, and there's now a 2017 version of that reference, and so we're just updating that. Questions on those definitional changes? All right, so moving on to, now out of the definition, starting to move down through the permit. We're adding a new table that describes the CAFO sizes by species to include the new definitions we developed in December of last year. So the new table will now describe what a tier 1 large and a tier 2 large facility are by the different animal species. The small and medium sizes stay the same. But because of the fee change in December of 2019 that created those new, split the large into two pieces, we've included that. Also included language in 2 or 3 different places in the permit to describe the electronic submission of some documents that are required by the permit. and electronic reporting for NPDES permits. And these are the requirements that are coming to the state from EPA. And so we're working cooperatively with DEQ and EPA to develop and implement the systems that will allow these things to happen, and include those requirements to submit things through these systems once they're up and running and functional. And so that's in there, and that will be something new for this permit. We're updating the language to describe the numeric effluent limits and quantitation limits. This is if each permit has to have a effluent limit in it. It's a requirement of the NPDES program. For CAFOs, it has always been a narrative limit of 0. Now it is a numeric limit of 0. But when you run the lab analysis on, say, nitrate nitrogen, you can't necessarily guarantee 0, but the quantitation limit is the limit that the methodology approved to analyze that material, how low they can get and still be accurate. And so we're discussing those limits. They were in the old permit. They will remain in the new one, but we likely will change some language to describe the word 0, and then how that ties to the quantitation limits of the different things. So we're analyzing for nitrogen, phosphorus, and bacteria, and each of those have their own quantitation limit. We're talking about including what we call a 2-step permitting process for a defined group of new large CAFO facilities. And so I think what the questions we'll have will be, what group will that consist of? We're pretty solid that we'd like them to be new. So these are brand new facilities that have never been permitted before. It's not existing expanding facilities. These would be brand new facilities that are of a certain size or larger, that when we issue the permit to one of them, we would issue a permit, and the permit issuance initially would allow them to build the facility according to the designs that we approved in their application. Then we would conduct an inspection, or it could be multiple inspections as they build, to ensure that the facility is operable prior to them being able to bring animals onto the facility. So it's kind of somewhat like a building approval. If you're building a house, you build a house and then you get a plumbing inspection, and then you would get a separate electrical inspection. And then once those inspections are completed, it allows you to continue construction and cover up the walls after you have your electrical inspection, or turn your water on if you have a sewer pipe connection inspection. And that would be something we would include in the permit. It would describe, would be required only by this, defined group of facilities. We're also looking at, for these new facilities, and I went one step further on this one by suggesting that this group potentially could be defined as the large tier 2 facilities. But again, these are conversations the agencies are still having. We would require a water supply plan. So this is any new facility, again, of a certain size that we'll yet have to define. Prior to them obtaining permit coverage, we would need a written document from them that we would then review with the Water Resources Department, so they would show us what their water supply plan is to operate the facility, and Water Resources, we would work with them to confirm that these are legal sources of water. So again, still working on what the definition of that group may look like. Another change is on the reporting for discharge. All of our permits to date basically say, and this is a federal requirement, that you have to report within 24 hours. And we've updated that, and we're saying that you need to report noncompliance or discharge to the agency as soon as possible after discovering the discharge, but no later than 24 hours. And so we've had occasions where folks have waited, till 23 and 0.99 hours to report. And that's that's potentially could be a long time if there's a certain types of noncompliance or discharge going on. So we'd like to know as soon as possible. All right. I have a few more. We are thinking about increasing the soil sampling frequency for nitrate. So this would be fall soil samples for nitrate. This is for facilities that are located in groundwater management areas. So I talked earlier about adding that definition for groundwater management areas. All of the 3 GWAMAs that are currently in place in Oregon were set up because of nitrate levels in groundwater exceeding target limits that DEQ had put on them of 7 parts per million. The drinking water standard by the EPA sets is 10. And so following the DEQ guidance, if a certain percentage of wells in a region are testing 7 or higher, DEQ may create a groundwater management area, declare a groundwater management area. And for facilities in those areas, because nitrate is the pollutant that's causing that issue, we felt it would be important to look at the soil sampling frequency for that particular potential pollutant in those facilities. And what that possibly could look like, as an example, would be if you are a large in a GWAMA on a general permit, the current requirement is you have a sampling activity every year, but you're sampling a minimum of 20% of your fields every year. So you have data to look at every year and data to evaluate your nutrient management plan operations, but your minimum would be 20% of the fields a year. We would change that, or the proposal is to change that to asking those facilities to sample 100% of their fields every year for nitrate. The small and mediums currently have a frequency statewide that they would sample. They have to sample their fields once every 5 years, but there's not a requirement for an annual sampling activity. So I guess what could happen would be on the last day of a 5-year permit's life, a small facility or medium facility could go out and take their soil samples and have operated 4.99 years without data. And we feel in a groundwater management area, increasing that frequency for smalls and mediums to a sampling activity every year with a minimum of 20%. So we would move that the old large requirement down to the smalls and mediums for facilities in a groundwater management area, and move that more frequent to all fields for larges. I kind of use the word fields loosely. We basically use the NRCS definition for field or management unit. That's the unit of land that you can discuss, with one sample. And so again, that's a starting point for a conversation on an activity like this. But I wanted to let folks know that was out there. And then the last one I had was the CAFO annual report, and we're not proposing changing any of the data that needs to be reported. That's set to us from the CAFO rules, the federal rules. But the annual report is going to be probably the biggest document that's going to be could be reported in the e-reporting format when that becomes available. So pretty much the one thing the e-reporting will touch on all CAFOs is going to be that annual report. There are waivers from e-reporting based on the availability of broadband internet service where the facility is located. And we actually have facilities that don't even have power, let alone internet. So that will be one of the things we'll be looking at. And I'm sure it would be subject to any of those waivers that could be issued. And then we're also working with DEQ as and EPA as they develop this system and see how we might work to help that work out. So that's all I had on the permit. Well, folks have questions or comments at this point, or want to send them in writing, or are waiting to see them, these things spelled out more in detail in a permit, happy to entertain any of that.
Yeah, Wim, this is Tammy, and I have another question. Because the dairies that are in the Guama are all required to have individual permits because they land apply. So the other facilities in the Guama, I guess how many of them are under the regular permits? How many are in the Guamas that are not dairies?
So I can't off the top of my head tell you that number, Tammy, but so let's go back to the individual permit requirement. So for large facilities in groundwater management areas, we do require individual permits, but we do not require individual permits for dairies currently that are small and medium located in Guamas, and we do have those. So
okay, thanks for clarifying that part of it. Yeah. Thank you.
So that would, potentially would affect, and again, this requirement isn't a general permit. This requirement that we're talking about would not impact anybody that had an individual permit, because they're going to have their own customized sampling schedule built within that permit that only applies to them. And so all of the large facility, or all the large dairies in like, let's say you look at Lower Umatilla, they all have individual permits. They all have their own sampling frequency. It's 100% of all the fields for those facilities. And then there are other species permitted in those areas of different sizes that would be impacted by that change in frequency as well. All right, any other questions, comments on that list? All right, well, thanks for your patience as I kind of monotone through that. And again, I'm hoping sooner rather than later we'll be able to implement those into a paper document, and you can have a look at that and make your comments and edits individually and supply them to us. That would be very appreciated by us. All right, so I wanted to move on to the 2 o'clock item, which is the interagency coordination on new large CAFO applications. And I'm conveying apologies from Stephanie, who got called away to another meeting and wasn't able to join us today. So I'll kick that off. I know Jeff and Beth, if you have anything to add in, feel free to do that. So this coordination is happening because we received a permit application from the Easter Day family, and it's to issue a new permit on an existing site and a facility that used to be known as Lost Valley Farm. And so 3 agencies, ODA, DEQ, and the Water Resources Department began collaborating on that application. And questions and conversations we've had in that activity have led us to think about developing a more formalized coordination when we get other new large CAFO applications. If we were to get another new large CAFO application, potentially in a groundwater management area, could be bigger than that, could be anywhere in the state. And so I just wanted to let you know that we were having those conversations, and because of the groups that are involved there, the agencies that are involved there, the purview of these agencies have a wider range than just water. So, air quality, DEQ has authority over air quality. The Water Resources Department has authority over water quantity, and ODA does not have those authorities. So that's part of the reason for the conversation. And we're kind of right in the middle of it. So there's not an outcome at this particular point, but we are continuing to have those coordination activities and believe that it's probably a wise move as we move forward with other applications that potentially could come into us, having that coordinational activity as a rule for those types of applications. And again, potentially the laws change both on the federal level as well as the state level, and this allows us to keep up to date on what changes are impacting those agencies. And these facilities, like any other facility, it's not just a monochrome activity that definitely covers multiple facets of environment that we should look at. And so that's the reason and kind of the activity that we're undergoing. So I wanted to make sure you were all aware of it, so nobody was surprised that we were having these conversations. And I can't tell you what the outcome of them may be. Like I said, Jeff or Beth, I don't know if you had comments along those lines or wanted to weigh in on that.
Thanks, Webb. Actually, yeah, really at this time, and I'm just starting to get re-involved since I've been out of those conversations for the last probably month or so. So really nothing to weigh in at this point in time.
All right, great. I think that's a good way to describe it. That we're relatively new in this activity, and so just have to kind of keep looking forward to see what may come out of it. I don't know if folks have things that they would like us to look at, either as a single agency ODA or as this new coalition of groups as we think about new facilities coming along. If folks have ideas about that, I'd be happy to have a conversation about them now or hear about them later, whatever you'd like. All right. Well, I'm going to see if Russ is on. Russ, can you hear me? I think Russ is planning on having another individual do a video presentation for us on this filter manure treatment system. There are some of them operating on dairies in Washington State, and pretty interesting system. So Russ may be still setting up because we're 10 minutes away from his item. Let's see. How about if I guess I'll move to that 240 item for a little while, and I can start on that, and then we'll have to break for Russ when he's ready to go, and then we can go back to that. So Easter Day Family Farms CAFO update. The first thing I would say about that update, it kind of goes back to our 2 o'clock agenda item, and that is those 3 agencies that I talked to you about, DEQ, ODA, and WRD, as well as the Oregon Health Authority, are collaborating together to develop the permit, to take the permit and the related documents out to a public notice, to do a broad outreach to a wide variety of stakeholders across the state and the region, and to have conversations about the contents of the permit itself and the operational activities of not just this facility but facilities like it, and how the agencies would look to manage that activity. And so again, it's touching multiple media. So the CAFO permit is a water quality permit. That permit can't include, by statute here in our state, anything other than those items required to regulate surface or groundwater. So even if we wanted to put an air quality item into that permit, it would not be allowed. And so if you want to have a conversation about air quality issues, it's going to have to be in a separate vehicle, I guess, to carry those conversations. However, the activities on those facilities are pretty much intertwined, and that's why the agencies are having these conversations about how those facilities operate. The other thing is the water quantity piece of that. Again, ODA doesn't have regulatory authority over that item. The Water Resources Department does. And facilities, especially large size facilities, have large water requirements. And so looking at where the water comes from, what kind of water reuse options are there, what kind of water conservation options are there, and how do these systems operate in general, so that everybody can have a better understanding on their impact and where control points need to be, are part of the reasons for these conversations. And so that's part of the things that we're doing in that coordination with the agencies. So that continues on. We do not have a date yet when we're ready to go to public notice with the permit and the evaluation report. So that's an individual NPDES permit for the proposed Easter Day facility called Easter Day Farms Dairy. The animal numbers are a little smaller than the Lost Valley site was, 28,300 total animals. The dairy component is about 18,000, and there's a beef component, which was different than Lost Valley, that's 10,000. The same footprint of farm ground and production area. The production area, there is considerable infrastructure there now, but it's not completely built out to handle the operation that they're proposing to. So again, they can't construct anything without a permit. That permit has a two-step permitting in there for the remainder of the infrastructure that they would need to construct. And so that's the real live example of the two-step permitting. We've already written it into that permit. We also have a water quantity supply plan requirement in that permit. Still working on the language of it, but it will be part of that permit. And sampling the monitoring wells that are already existing out there, and the soil sampling, water, moist soil moisture sampling requirements that are pretty comprehensive. So there's moisture meters on every field, soil sample requirements every year on every field. The monitoring, the soil moisture monitoring, is continuous throughout the year. And then a kind of a robust array of sampling activities to sample the nutrient load that they're proposing to put on the fields from the solids and the liquids that they generate there. So those conversations continue. Next steps is when the agencies complete their coordinational activities and we come up with a final draft, we would then begin a public comment period. And it'd be open it would open in 30 days, we'd have a hearing, and it would close after 35 days. So that's the setup we're working under right now. And we would, we've already had a pretty broad outreach with a lot of different groups. We can continue to do that. Once we do go to notice, part of that notice would be activities both in English and Spanish, and presentations to groups that we've developed relationships with out in the region there. The Hispanic Advisory Council in the city of Hermiston, we made a presentation to them when we did the Lost Valley permit. We will do another one with the Easter Day one, and other groups like that. So if anybody's aware of a group that would like to hear about this when we're able to go out on the road and do that, or even if it's virtual, we're happy to do that. Just let me know, and we'll add those folks to the list. We have a citizen advocate position now in the agency, and her name's Christina Higby. She's responsible to help me, make sure that we address all these groups and issues. So appreciate having Christina as a partner in that activity. All right, Russ, can you hear me? Are you on? Janet, do you have any emails from Russ or any communication with him that he may be having issues?
I do not. Did you check your email to see if he tried to contact you?
I'm going to do that right now. Hang on. Yeah, no, nothing from him. I'm going to shoot him something here. All right, well, I have alerted him. We'll see what we get here. All right, well, I guess we'll continue to go down the agenda until we can hear from Russ and company. So what's the next item on the agenda, Janet? I just deleted it as I shot that email out.
It's the partner agency updates.
I guess before we do that, I was going to ask, so does anybody have questions on the Lost Valley site or Easter Days application? I guess one thing I would add there is that that site is still under an NPDS permit. It's a zero animal permit, and that was part of an order of mutual agreement that we signed with the trustee of the Lost Valley estate when it filed bankruptcy. And as part of that, because there is extensive infrastructure there, and a lot of that infrastructure is part of a waste system that requires a permit in our state, we needed to make sure that there was a responsible party that would maintain the permit for that facility, even if it didn't have animals there, because it's going to still collect stormwater. And there was still a requirement for continuous monitoring on the groundwater monitoring wells and other things on the facility. And so as part of the Easter Day purchase, that zero animal permit got transferred from the Lost Valley estate to the Easter Days. And so they hold a zero animal permit there. They can't operate in the waste facilities or the animal facilities other than to, maintain those facilities without animals and collect and manage whatever stormwater falls on the facility. And, they're doing that, speculatively on potentially being able to get another permit. But that permit is currently in effect, and they are completing all those activities. We're continuing to inspect and look at all the compliance activities that they've been doing there. And there's been good result from all that activity. In the event that the agencies weren't ever able to issue the Easter Days of permit, our agreement says that the owner, which would now be the Easter Days, would have to decommission the facilities if it can't operate as a permit. These waste facilities are pretty specific that they would have to decommission them and or repurpose them so that they weren't defined as waste treatment works anymore, so that the site then wouldn't need a permit, and then they could farm the ground and use the buildings for other, store hay in the buildings or whatever, and, do other things at that site. So just to let you know, that's also written in our agreement, that there was some thought that if a permit was, for whatever reason, was never available there, they would then have to do that decommissioning or repurposing. So I think that was pretty much everything I had on the Lost Valley side. and Easterday side. Any questions, comments there? All right. Russ, I'm still not seeing you or anybody from your outfit on the screen. Are you there on the phone? No, Russ. All right. Well, I know his business partner is from Argentina, and when we last talked, the potential was going to be that he was going to try to make the presentation from Argentina, which technologically could work, but they may be having some technological challenges. All right. So Janet, what was our next item?
Partner agency updates.
All right, so let's go to that. Anybody from our partner groups have comments that they want to share with us or updates on things going on with you? We do know that the Cattlemen's Association has a new executive. Welcome aboard, Tammy, in that role.
You are so kind, Wim. Thank you.
All right, not hearing any updates. What's our next item?
Public comment.
So let's do public comment, and then what I'm thinking about doing is taking a 10-minute break after we do that, and then I'll try to get on the phone with Russ and see if we can sort out whatever issues he's having. But let's go to public comment right now. And so if anybody has a comment, we'd be happy to take that. All right, going once. Anybody with public comment? All right, well, not hearing any. It's 2:25 by my clock, so let's come back at 2:35, and we'll see if we can find out where Russ is at. All right, thanks. All right, so welcome back, folks. It's 2:35, and I was able to connect with Russ by phone, and he's working on hooking up his presentation to make that to us. So I'm gonna just mute myself, and he will be hopefully coming on board shortly to get that rolling. Thanks. There we go. Let's try that. Russ, are you there? I can see you, but I can't hear you. Must look for the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen and hit that to make it green. I know on our end, it shows that you're trying to communicate through your phone rather than your computer. So when you start the hookup, you have to select the computer audio. Hey, Janet, is there an audio pin number? Now try it, Russ. I see your microphone up now, so just unmute yourself on the mic.
There
Now
we
try
go.
it. There we go.
We're a little
All right,
sluggish in the
everybody
world
else.
of technology.
Yeah, everybody else wake up. We got the technology stuff figured out. So thanks for being patient. So this is Russ Davis and Matthias with Biofiltro, and they're going to talk to us about some manure treatment technology that they're implementing in Washington State and other parts of the world. And we were fortunate enough to tour it last year. Our CAFO staff looked at an installation they have in Washington and were impressed. And so appreciate these guys coming on to tell us about it. So Janet, can you make Russ the presenter, and then he'll share his screen with us?
Okay, you're good to go.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yes,
Looks
I
good
see
on
it.
my end, Russ. Yep.
All right. Well, first of all, sorry about the confusion of being on here. One of the things that's happened in the last few weeks here is we inadvertently discovered that Biofiltro also removes PCBs. And it wasn't something that we were trying to accomplish necessarily, but a client who asked us to do some testing on PCB removal, we did, and got a 90%, 90.6%, and 97% removal rate of PCBs, and so that's quite the stir. So we've been talking today to a couple of Walla clients who are concerned about that, and the city of Walla. So I apologize for the confusion today. It's just been one of those kind of days. So Biofiltro, kind of start from scratch. You guys know some of this probably, but Biofiltro is based out of Chile. It was a technology that was used in communities in Chile to clean their wastewater at a low cost for the community. Here in the United States, we've been using it for applications such as dairies and wineries and breweries. There's actually, as long as it's biologically active waste or needs to be treated biologically, the biofilter can do it. It's 170 systems like that around the world. So far, so good. The biofilter is kind of a whole new concept of using worms and ultimately worm biome and worm castings to treat the water. And at the end of some period of time, you harvest the material and you're able to have worm castings. Not that. Okay, good. So this gives you an idea of some of the targets that we're trying to hit. BOD is a big issue outside of the dairy industry, especially with wineries and breweries and sanitary waste, municipal waste. And that's a pretty good target. We've been testing it in some of these recent projects, and we're getting right between 95 and 98%. TSS, that's one of the biggest problems that dairies, those of you that are familiar with dairy manure know that even when you remove the solids through separation or through a press or some sort of settling system, TSS has a tendency to float along, stay suspended into the water treatment. And so the biofilter team has had to work on finding creative ways of addressing sometimes it's 2 and 3% TSS in the water. So even though it's water treatment, it's also really to some extent solids treatment. The goal is to try to remove the N to the point where we're not sending out nitrogen that can contaminate the groundwater or surface water. Also removes most of the ammonia and ammonium in the process. Fats, oils, and grease. Phosphorus removal between 70 and 95%. And so dissolved solids, not such a big focus, but also there. So kind of a cutaway view of the system. It's a patented system. It's a method patent that biofilter has implemented. The idea is basically using worms and worm humus to inoculate the medium so that the biological activity can do its job. So this is from a cutaway. You can kind of see it's basically like a concrete, you can imagine this like a concrete swimming pool, but it doesn't hold water. And the purpose of it is just to hold the media in place and keep it contained. But if you pulled away the outside wall, it would just sit there like a big sponge. It's not actually holding water, so it has no hydraulic pressure inside. The water is sprayed on top and then percolates through the shavings and the worms, where the worms live inside the biome, down through some rock. The identification process. And the goal in the end is to create an aerobic environment with water so that we remove a lot of constituents, troublemakers, especially the bears. An actual worm in motion. So,
Hey Russ, your audio is going in and out. Is there anything on your end that can maybe fix that?
no.
It's almost like it's switching between two different kinds of mics and your little icon even switches. I don't know.
Okay. I only have one mic on and I'm not on the phone. I don't know. I guess maybe if I just lean into it a little bit, maybe that'll help us. I don't know.
Hey, Russ, can you kind of just speak directly into the phone mic if that's where you, it seems like when you turn your head is when we lose you a bit.
Okay, but if I'm facing you this way, it's okay.
That's
Right
great,
now,
thank
that
you.
looks good. Yeah.
Okay, so the worm is specifically Yersinia petita. It's a waste-eating worm. It's a kind of worm that you'd find if you making compost, worm compost, or if you found a little dead possum alongside the road, you might find Yersinia petita down there because they eat cane waste. So they eat the solids that come in the manure or in the winery waste or the brewery waste. They burrow inside these chips and basically are cleaning the filter as they go and also aerating the filter. They have a tendency to run in the 5 to 8 pH range. They find if it goes down too low, their ability to produce drops. They can die if it gets down below 3. So our goal is to try to keep it between 5 and 8, and their tendency is to neutralize pH as well. Worms live for 6 to 8 years if we do a good job and don't kill them off with a high pH event or something like that. They're making a steady, they're making family all the time. They're expanding their herd, and doubles every so often. I think the worm population is decided every 3 months. Okay, so it doubles every 3 months. And the worms get to the point where they essentially fill up the available food and space. And then once that is accomplished, they maintain their population, just like they would in the ground. So they target the soluble and dissolved solids. There's biological colonies, billions of microbes doing the job through this biofilm, essentially. Even though the worms are eating it, a lot of times customers get caught up on the idea of the worms doing all the work. Well, they do on the suspended solids part, but a lot of what they're doing is leaving this film, and the biological film actually is treating a lot of the constituents. So this is kind of a basic version of how the biofiltration system works. Essentially get your effluent from your primary separator, and a dairy would be a press or a screw press or a slope screen, depending on the type of application you have. Goes in an equalization tank. The purpose of the equalization tank is to make sure that we don't get a surge of a high pH application or low pH application. So especially in applications at a winery where it comes into us at 3.5 pH, or just cleaner caustic, use caustic and cleaner tanks, it's coming in at 11. Buffer that before it goes into the worms. That's the first thing. It takes very little energy to run this thing. It's converting these potential contaminants, and of course, contaminants are only contaminants when they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. But nitrogen is valuable and phosphorus is valuable. As long as we can manage it, it can be used to grow crops and to be sold to plants. Typical, you guys have seen most of this before. Right there. Rotary screen, you can see those at wineries, dairies, food processors, parabolic screens. Also, you see those at wineries, food processors. Dissolved air flotation, you'll see these, especially where there's a large volume of suspended solids. There's one of these running currently. I don't know if it's still in a test mode or if it's a permanent mode up at the GDR, DeRuyter Brothers Dairy. Sorry, not DeRuyter Brothers, Dan DeRuyter's Dairy in Sunnyside. And it's so complicated because you have to have polymers or flocculants of some sort. It's expensive to run, but we can work in context with those. Oftentimes it's not needed in a biofilter. So these are just some metrics you can see. Sanitary waste has been biofilter's primary business in Chile. Dairy was kind of up here on the scale we're talking about, kind of a new task for us. And the first big project was, of course, Austin Allred's Dairy. It's turned into quite the monster now. It's processing about 500,000 gallons a day on 7 acres. It kind of gives you an idea. Anything that's generating organic waste that can be treated, biofilter can treat. There's some applications that aren't as natural of a fit, like a chemical problem. For example, a paper plant or a pulp plant where they've got a lot of chemicals involved. Biofilter is not really a chemical reduction system. So around the world, this is where you're finding biofilters. Australia, New Zealand, South America. There's one in Antarctica at the naval station there, at the Chilean Naval Station. It's covered only to keep the snow out of it, but the biology of the worms combined with the effluent makes it so it doesn't freeze up like you might imagine. It's biologically active. They have also one in the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is one of the hottest places on Earth. So last, like how cold can it get and how hot can it get? We've got both ends of the spectrum. We have one running. Here's an M1 system, M2. At a winery, we've got a couple of these in Walla Walla. Is this the same exact thing? Testing by his dad. So as biofilters kind of develop this technology from a box full of worms in the smaller application, this particular unit you're looking at has 2 beds. There's a bed on top and a bed on the bottom. So essentially twice as much it can treat twice as much water as normal because of the second bed on top. It's good for tight spaces, 200 gallons per day. We got 2 of these at a winery here. This just shows you it's a different winery application, different size unit. One of the nice things about the biofilter is it's not a fixed size. So if we have an odd shaped piece of real estate, they can fit generally as long as we can access the middle of it and harvest it. California. Wineries in California. 5 wineries in California. Finelli Dairy was the first project that Biofilter did with the dairy. It's kind of an experiment. It's how we discovered them up here. We heard that they were trying this project at a dairy in California using worms and chips. It all sounded very mysterious. And so we were all kind of, well, boy, wouldn't that be cool if that worked? And so Austin Allred himself said, I'm going to go down there and check this thing out. I'm going to get on the shovel. I'm going to dig down and make sure I understand it. And it's essentially worked exactly like Biofilter has said, as far as the removal, the way it's built, the job that it can do, throughput. It's not very often the technology works exactly like it's supposed to. It's nice when it does. Just kind of a side note. So, working with a juice company in Walla Walla, and they're one of the companies that we're doing some testing with. And the purpose of the test was to see if we could lower the EOD and the PCB. And they called us and said, look, we're impressed. It's working beyond our expectations. So we want to go to the next level and talk about a full scale unit. It's not very often that a customer will call you and say, it's doing better than we thought or better than we said. And the worms are just robust. They do the job, and they take a lot of pressure, and they really step up the job. Yeah, okay, fruit juice processing plant will want to Clovis. There it is in the middle of a community. Did you have to do an assessment, environmental assessment for this? No. This is a municipal project, California. It's kind of it's along the highway. There's some McDonald's and a gas station, and they didn't really want to put in a full municipal plant. It's 80,000 gallons per day. It's kind of a pop-up, and it's there permanently. Other vineyard, Fetzer Vineyards, California, about 100,000 gallons per day. It's the Royal Dairy Project. It has the potential to go to 750,000 gallons per day. Currently running, it's about 500,000. Hear them from back there. It's essentially based on TSS. So TSS. Seriously? 22,000 pounds? TSS, suspended solids. So again, that's the issue with the flush dairies, is they say, sending you some flush water and it's water, but it still is sometimes 3% solids that are just suspended and aren't settling. A lot of conversations about this is a winery, right? Yeah. Right here. Here's the Chelan Air Force Base. Yeah, so it's not a heated building. It just has a cover on it to keep the snow off. 1,000 gallons per day. Just the smaller units that are made for emergency response or for demonstration. We're actually talking again to a small dairy in Oregon about doing a demonstration plant, a 2-year plant over there to see if we can reduce some of their contaminants and potentially also gas. Systems are pretty basic. It's concrete. They last for a long time. I think maybe all of the biofilters started operating in Chile are still operating in Chile. There's no reason to decommission them if they're doing the job. The material inside has to be taken out periodically. and replaced with new chips. And then the material that's pulled out is screened, and depending on the market and the product that's been there, it can be sold back to the market. We currently are processing castings up at the biofilter city agricultural applications. Here's kind of the inside of one of those double layer units. You get an idea, depending on the type of waste and the intensity of the waste. 11 gallons can spread down to 2.5 and sometimes less. This is an interesting thing. So when biofilter first came here, they said we have a unit that we can use to clean dairy water, and so we went and made some presentations, and the cost is $1 million for 5,000 cows or whatever it is. And because it was, they felt, a lot of the dairies just felt this is risky. We don't know much about it. What does it work? We got the capex all sunk into the unit. Biofilter came back and said we have a new program, and we're going to call it wastewater as a service. And the way it works is we'll install the unit at our expense, and we'll put up the capex, capital expense, operate the system, and you can pay us on a per gallon basis. And that has got a lot of traction, especially with people crippled with capital, especially now. Some people want to just put up the capital because they can get it's cheaper capital for them. It's not as big of an issue as it was at first. It was a good way for us to get the thing off of center. Science was saying, we really like the idea of this thing, but it's risky for us. As you know, dairies often, and all types of CAFOs are at risk. People are coming to them saying, just put this in, it'll solve all your problems, and nothing works. So, anyway, that's kind of a summary of the biofilter system. If you have questions, we're happy to answer those.
All right. Well, anybody that have questions for Russ, I'll mute myself and just go ahead and ask Russ directly. Russ, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So Russ, one of the questions that I got in the chat box was, would you be willing to share the slide deck with us? And some folks had some difficulty hearing. The audio was kind of in and out throughout the presentation. I don't know if you have a talking point list that kind of matches with the slides. If you'd be willing to share that, whatever you're willing to share.
When we're off our call here, then we can email you the presentation and some talking points.
All right, thanks. I'll turn it back to the group. Questions for Russ? All right, I'm not hearing any. Thanks you guys for fighting through those technological issues and taking the time to make that presentation. And yeah, anything you share with us, I'll be happy to share with our group. I guess expect some outreach, possibly directly from group members, looking at presentations for their industries, or yeah, if you're successful in getting one in Oregon, be happy to be part of setting up a tour.
You're on my list about that. I need to talk to you about this project anyways. It kind of came up out of nowhere in the last few days, and I think the odds are high that we're going to do it.
All right, yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm also intrigued about the wastewater as a service concept. I think that has a lot of benefit. They know exactly what the cost is based on the throughput, and aren't responsible for the maintenance and learning a new song and dance, if you will. And that could be an interesting concept.
Is there, if you had to boil it down to a specific water-based issue, is there something, for example, in Washington State and Sunnyside, it's all about the nitrates. are you finding that there's certain problems in certain areas in Oregon? Specific constituents are causing pollution problems, in the water, in the air. Is there anything in particular you guys are wrestling with?
Yeah, we definitely could point to some regional issues. So just right south of the Yakima area into Oregon, we've got a groundwater management area, and nitrate's going to be the key issue there. So anything we could tune for maximum nitrogen removal. And the other thing, it's not just necessarily removal, but it's what form is it removed in, and what form can we utilize it in? Because we still need to grow crops, but we need non-organic forms that are more readily manageable. And I could see nutrients from a facility like this, displacing synthetic or mined materials. And then the other two things I would tell you that in TMDL areas for phosphorus could be the one thing we're looking at. And the third item would be bacteria. So on the coast and shellfish growing areas with runoff, the bacteria reductions would probably be the most important there.
Okay. Yeah, if there's a conversation that needs to be had where you have some specific projects that are causing you, I don't want to say, I got to say it the right way. If there's folks who are struggling with this specific contaminant problem, I'd love to just talk to them and help them with information and ideas. Every time that we find a problem, we generally find something that kind of links with it as a solution. We're finding that there's some folks out there who are in the commercial fertilizer business who have been starting to move more toward biologicals. So the nutrients and the Wilbur-Ellis's, they think that the worm casting thing is neat, but they don't really understand how to market it. So there's kind of a new group, you probably one of these guys too, there's kind of a new group of folks that are coming along, focused on biologicals in the soil, trying to rebuild humus and contain water and sequestering carbon and things like that. So there's all kinds of possibilities if we can help.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think the other dimension would be, what are the greenhouse gas implications of operating a system like this, over a facility that doesn't have this kind of treatment, and there may be some benefit there too.
Yes, it's over 90% reduction in methane production capability. One of the things you could do, I'll just throw this out. Frank Mitloner you guys probably know Frank Mitloner out of UC Davis has kind of made it as one of his goals to research the biofiltro to see what exactly is going on. He's produced a couple different documents. If you have time to surf Google and enter Frank Mitloner and UC Davis biofiltro, you can find kind of some of the things he's working on, gas reduction. It's helpful.
Okay, that's really timely. So if folks couldn't hear, Dr. Frank Mitloner is a researcher out of UC Davis who kind of specializes in greenhouse gas emissions especially from dairies, but from agriculture, and is a worldwide expert on the subject. He's done some research on this system, on the biofiltro system, and has some papers on greenhouse gas activities coming out of this system. So that's one thing Jen and I'll do, is try to pull up those papers and share that with the group. Along with these slides, and it's always nice when you can kind of buy one machine and it'll kind of do several different things, like a Swiss Army knife. Because we're all these facilities have multi impacts and multifaceted operations, and when you push on one side of the balloon to treat something, you usually push it out on the other side and need to manage it over there. So definitely good to look at that.
So far, so good. The biofiltro is not only is it doing its job to clean water with byproducts, creating some new markets. It's a surprise to have something that's it's not that complicated. I know that I sound like a salesperson because I kind of am, but it's because I've seen it and I've experienced it, and I just am surprised at how well it works. Count myself.
Sure. Well, one thing about the treatment as a service piece, I guess if it didn't work and didn't deliver, I'm guessing part of the contract says that, well, we'll take it away if it doesn't work like we claim it will. So
That's right.
you know, that's an interesting guarantee.
And it's, you only pay for the gallons that are treated.
All right, well, thank you guys. I really appreciate your time and presentation. Sorry the technology was kind of challenging today, but thank you for your
Mostly
efforts.
me, man.
And we'll be in touch. Take care.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, Janet, do you want to switch back to me then? All right, well, thanks for sitting through that, folks. I apologize for the technology stuff. It's just, I guess, sign of the times. Does anybody have industry updates you want to share with us? Questions that you thought about other parts of the agenda that you want to circle back on?
Wim, I have a quick question. Some of the sample language that you're working on, are you going to continue developing and sending all of that out to us at one time? Or are you going to send us snippets or?
I mean, Tammy, I think my thought is that the first review level is going to be through the agencies, and once we get some comfort there, then I'll be happy to share it out with everybody. And so once we kind of do an initial download of it, you know, then I think it will start the conversation with everybody, and I'm sure we'll be editing it, you know, as we go. But I'll, you know, promise to send it out as soon as we can, you know, once the agencies are initially fine with it and can get that out. And if we can only agree on certain parts of it, I'll send it that way, and then you can start working on that.
Thank you very much.
All right, any other questions, comments? And again, I'll wait for Russ to send me what he's going to on a presentation and potentially some talking points about that system. I think take a look at that wastewater treatment as a service option. That's an interesting way to get a machine. It's you know, you're leasing it essentially and paying on a per gallon of treated activity. Not sure what the prices are there, but an interesting concept. And I'll look for the Dr. Mitloder work on those systems from the air quality perspective, and they are so new likely that they haven't been included in, say, the Yakima air quality list of BMPs and or the Idaho ammonia emission BMP list. If they, you know, if they have some effect, you know, it sounded like that they may be efficient. You know, machines or biologically active materials to remove greenhouse gases and turn them into other compounds, and may end up appearing on the list of as an air quality BMP as well as a water quality treatment system. So I'll see if I can dig up those documents and share those with you all. Janet, am I forgetting anything? I think I got everything on the list.
It looks like you have everything.
All right, last chance for anybody to make a comment or ask a question. Otherwise, we're gonna give you some time back. And this will be the final meeting for this year. We'll send out the schedule for next year starting in April, but we'll get that out probably before the end of the year here. All right, sorry, Brian, I think I may have interrupted you there.
No, I was just going to say bye. Thanks for the meeting.
All right, you're very welcome. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your afternoon and stay safe.
Thanks, Wim.